The first thing they saw was the muddy paw print on the step, then the note. It was stuck to the swollen wood with a piece of duct tape, edges curling from the rain. The paper was torn from a mechanic's receipt book, smudged, damp, almost unreadable. It simply said, "She was safe. She didn't stop barking." Jay. Rachel covered her mouth. Her husband stared at the paper like it might vanish. Their daughter knelt, arms wrapped around Sadie, the family's golden mutt, who whimpered softly and licked her hand. "No one saw him?" Rachel asked, her voice cracking. A neighbor shook her head. "Someone said a man carried her here. Didn't say a word. Just left." They never saw his face, but Rachel never forgot that handwriting, and the way Sadie looked at the door, like she was waiting for someone. But to understand how we got to this moment, we need to go back to the beginning. Before the water rose, before the streets turned into rivers and strangers became lifelines, there was just a small rented house on a quiet stretch of road. It had peeling paint, a leaning fence, and a patchy yard full of weeds and toys. But it was home. Inside, Rachel stirred coffee in a chipped blue mug that once belonged to her sister. She didn't drink it. Not really. She just held it. The warmth gave her something to do with her hands. Her husband, Matt, left early most mornings in a dusty plumbing van. His back was shot, and his knees weren't far behind, but he kept working because that's what you do when the bills pile up and the fridge rattles like it's trying to fly away. Their daughter, Ellie, was 6, the kind of kid who always had something in her pocket, a pebble, a crayon, a secret. And then there was Sadie. Sadie had come to them 3 years earlier, just after Rachel's miscarriage, the second one. A friend from church had found the dog limping near the railroad tracks. No collar, no chip, just ribs and fear and eyes that didn't blink. Rachel took her in, not out of pity, but because she needed to save something that would stay. Sadie never left Ellie's side after that, slept by her bed, waited by the door when she went to school, barked at anything that came too close. "She's not just a dog," Matt would say. "She's a tiny security system with fur." But Rachel knew better. Sadie was glue. They were holding together this family, with threads and tired fingers and a dog that never stopped watching. Their house had water stains near the ceiling from the storm 5 years ago. They hadn't had the money to fix it properly, so Matt painted over it with mismatched white. Every time it rained, Rachel would look up at that ceiling and wait. "You think it'll leak again?" Matt had asked her one night, when thunder rolled low like a warning. She didn't answer. Just listened to the ticking kitchen clock, to Ellie breathing through the monitor in the bedroom, to Sadie's soft, rhythmic snore under the table. The forecast said the river would swell, that sandbags were being handed out behind the fire station. Rachel didn't want to think about evacuations or worst-case scenarios. She had packed a duffel bag months ago. Toothbrushes, water bottles, a folder with birth certificates, and pay stubs, just in case. Because when you've already lost things no one else saw, pregnancies, hope, pieces of yourself, you learn to prepare quietly. Ellie drew pictures that week of boats and rainbows. She liked rain, said it made the world sound soft. Rachel smiled and nodded, but packed extra batteries anyway. Then came Friday. The morning felt thick, the way it does before something happens. Sadie was restless, pacing. The dog had instincts Rachel didn't fully understand, but she'd learned to listen. Matt kissed her forehead before heading to a service call across town. "Back by 3, he said. "We'll hunker down." Rachel nodded. "Stay dry." He pointed at Sadie. "She's your early warning system." Sadie barked once, sharp and certain, like she understood. By noon, the sky looked bruised. The radio crackled with flood advisories. Rachel turned off the stove, closed the blinds, and watched the yard disappear under sheets of rain. She set Ellie's rain boots by the door, packed Sadie's leash in the go bag, checked her phone for alerts. The power flickered twice. Still, she hoped it would pass. Maybe this storm would just be loud and messy, not the kind that left scars. But when the creek behind their house spilled over like a glass knocked from the edge of a counter, Rachel knew. It was happening again, only this time they had more to lose. She called Matt. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. At 1:42 p.m., on the emergency alert screamed from her phone. "Mandatory evacuation. Zone 3. Move immediately." She grabbed the duffel, called for Ellie, snapped on Sadie's leash. They moved fast, wading through ankle-high water that licked at the doorframe. Then the leash went taut. Sadie had bolted. down the hall, toward Ellie's bedroom, barking like fire alarms, refusing to leave. Rachel yelled, pulled. The dog backed away, growling at something neither of them could see. A moment later, a wave of water surged under the back door. Rachel froze. The floor groaned. Ellie screamed. The leash slipped from her hand. Sadie disappeared into the dark, and just like that, she was gone. There's no sound like rushing water when it's coming for you. It's not just the roar. It's the way the house seems to shiver, the way the floor sighs like it's giving up. It's the way a child's scream gets swallowed by it, like the storm doesn't care who you are or what you're carrying. Rachel shoved the duffel bag into Ellie's arms and scooped her up in one motion. "Hold on to me," she whispered, voice low and steel hard. They pushed through the rising water, the cold shocking against her thighs, couch cushions bobbing past like corpses. The front door jammed once, then gave way with a crack of swollen wood. Outside, it looked like a lake had swallowed their street. Cars were half submerged. A tricycle floated sideways in the neighbor's yard. And the rain, it didn't fall anymore. It slammed. Rachel looked back just once. Sadie hadn't come. She told herself the dog had crawled into a corner, would climb onto a dresser, would bark until someone heard. But something inside her cracked. A thread pulled too tight for too long. She almost dropped the bag. A truck rolled by, tires sending up tidal waves. Someone shouted, waved. Rachel lifted her arm, holding Ellie high. "Take her!" she yelled. 2 men jumped out. One carried Ellie to the truck. The other held Rachel's arm and helped her in. Everything was noise and cold and motion. Rachel kept turning, trying to look back. "Is there anyone else inside?" one of them asked. "My dog," she managed. She ran back. "I couldn't," but they were already moving. No time. No room. The water was coming fast. The truck climbed a hill. Rachel stared through the rear window until their house was gone, until the rooftops behind them turned into a brown and gray soup. She whispered Sadie's name, over and over. They were taken to a high school gym, turned temporary shelter. Cots, bottled water, the hum of generators. Volunteers moved like ghosts. People clung to each other, wet and shaking, passing around cell phones with no signal and towels that smelled like bleach. Ellie asked once, "Where's Sadie?" Rachel lied. "Someone will bring her." Matt arrived 2 hours later, drenched, limping, carrying nothing but a wrench in his tool belt. He had walked 3 miles when his van stalled out on a flooded overpass. He didn't cry when Rachel told him. He just sat beside Ellie, wrapped in a blanket, and stared at the floor like it owed him something. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. The sounds in the gym echoed wrong. Coughs and whispers, the buzz of a vending machine someone had pried open. She held her daughter close, memorizing the rhythm of her breathing. But in the space between heartbeats, she kept hearing that last bark, that sharp, urgent cry. She wondered if Sadie had been trying to warn them, to lead them to safety, or if she'd been trapped. The guilt came in waves, like the flood itself. The next morning, Rachel walked to the edge of the school parking lot and looked toward home. The sky was clearer now, as if the storm had never happened, but she knew what waited in that silence. Matt stood beside her. "First responders won't let people back in yet," he said. "Downed lines, gas leaks, still too dangerous." Rachel nodded. "She was trying to help us. I know. Do you think—" She couldn't finish. Matt looked down at his boots. "I don't know." That afternoon, a rescuer's dog found a toddler alive in a closet 3 blocks away. A cat was pulled from a tree. Someone brought in chickens wrapped in towels. The shelter applauded. But Sadie didn't come. Days passed. When they were finally allowed back, the house was a hollow shell. The couch was gone. The fridge had tipped. Mold already crawled up the drywall like vines. Rachel moved like a shadow, picking through drawers for papers that weren't ruined, for pieces that still looked like their life. Matt found a box of baby clothes floating in the hallway. He didn't say anything, just threw it in the dumpster behind the neighbor's fence. Ellie wandered the yard, calling Sadie's name over and over until Rachel had to pull her inside. "We'll keep checking the shelters," she promised. They did. Day after day, they visited the animal control center, the makeshift pet clinics, the message boards in the grocery store. No sign, no calls, just one blurry photo on a poster. Found, female mixed breed, scared but safe, no tag. It could have been her, or just another dog with the same eyes. Rachel left a note and her number. She checked her phone every hour. Nothing. Then, on the 6th morning, as dew clung to the wrecked porch and the sun made shadows long across the mud-streaked siding, she opened the front door and stopped cold. Sadie was there, skinny, shivering, wrapped in a dirty blue blanket, and under her paw, a note. He didn't have a uniform, no badge, no flashlight, no truck, just a damp gray hoodie, work boots soaked through, and a limp that got worse with every step. People didn't ask him questions, not in the middle of a flood. When someone shows up with strong hands and quiet eyes, you let them help. He'd started near the river bend, carrying sandbags for a neighbor who couldn't lift her own. Then he moved on, street to street, block to block, no direction but forward. He didn't talk much. Sometimes he nodded, sometimes he grunted, but mostly he listened, to the water, to the creaks of buildings under stress, to the voices that called for help from dark places. And that's when he heard it. Not a voice, but a bark, sharp, repetitive, refusing to give up. He turned down a narrow street, almost invisible now beneath the water. A street no one had cleared yet. Most people had already evacuated, but the sound kept coming. It led him to a half-submerged house with a twisted porch railing and an overturned mailbox jammed in the mud. The front door was swinging open and shut with the current. The bark came from behind the house, strained, desperate, muffled. He waded through broken fence panels and garden tools. His foot hit something sharp. He didn't stop. Behind the house, a shed had partially collapsed under a fallen branch. Beneath the wreckage, caught in a trap of metal and wood, was a dog, shaking, soaked, but barking. A rope was tangled around her back leg, caught on something inside the debris. She didn't growl. She didn't bare teeth. She just looked at him, wild with fear but anchored by instinct. He dropped to his knees in the water, slipped his hands through the wreckage, and began to untangle the rope. A nail caught his wrist, blood mixed with rain. He didn't flinch. He whispered, "Easy now. Almost there." The dog whimpered once, then licked his hand. He worked in silence, one piece at a time, like solving a puzzle only he could see. 10 minutes later, she was free. He scooped her up, bony ribs, muddy fur, eyes that didn't blink, and carried her through chest-deep water toward the edge of the street. A boy on a bike rode past and stared. "You okay?" the boy called out. He nodded. "Is that your dog?" "No," he said quietly. "She belongs somewhere." He found a house nearby that hadn't been swallowed completely. It looked empty, door wide open, porch sagging but still standing. He laid the dog down on a dry patch beneath the overhang and wrapped her in the only dry thing he had left, a flannel shirt he'd tucked into his backpack. He looked around. No lights, no people. He didn't know who the house belonged to, didn't know the family, didn't ask. He just took a scrap of paper from his back pocket, a receipt from a hardware store, and wrote what he could. She was safe. She didn't stop barking. Jay. He taped the note to the door with a strip of duct tape from his kit, patted the dog's head once more, and turned away. She didn't try to follow. She just lay there, blinking slowly, as if guarding the space between them. He limped back the way he came, bleeding, soaked, and silent. Later, someone would remember seeing a man with a heavy limp lifting tree branches off a stalled car. Another would recall a stranger handing out bottled water from a wheelbarrow near the gas station. But no one ever got his name. Not then. Not yet. The dog, though. She remembered everything. They almost didn't recognize her. Sadie was curled on the porch like she had never left, her coat matted with grime, the blue flannel wrapped around her like a second skin. Her tail wagged once when Ellie called her name. Then again, slower. Rachel fell to her knees. She didn't speak, didn't scream. She just buried her face in Sadie's fur and cried in a way she hadn't allowed herself to since the flood. Matt stood behind her, hands on his hips, disbelief in his silence. He reached for the note, still clinging to the door by its duct-taped edge. The paper was stiff with water damage, the handwriting rough, scrawled, not elegant, but certain. She was safe. She didn't stop barking. Jay. That was all it said. Not a number, not an address, just a letter, just a truth. Rachel reread it until the ink started to run again from her fingers. Ellie was hugging Sadie so tightly the dog let out a soft grunt. But she didn't move. She didn't pull away. She was home. They brought her inside like a miracle. Washed her gently in a plastic tub using bottled water and a ladle. Rachel cut burrs from her fur, while whispering thanks she didn't know how to direct. Sadie didn't bark. She didn't whine. She just watched the door, like she was waiting for someone to come back. 2 days later, the neighbor from across the street came by, carrying a folded lawn chair and a mug of instant coffee. "I saw her," the neighbor said. "That day." Rachel straightened. "Saw who?" "A man. He carried her through the water, real quiet. Looked like he could barely walk. Didn't say a word." "Did you talk to him?" "Nope. Thought maybe he lived a few blocks over. Never seen him before. Never saw him again." Rachel showed her the note. The neighbor squinted. "Just Jay?" "Huh." She tapped her mug. "Well, we get angels sometimes, even if they don't look like it." Over the next week, Rachel asked around, at the fire station, at the temporary shelter, at the animal clinic where they'd posted Sadie's photo. "Anyone know a man who helped rescue animals during the flood? With a limp, gray hoodie, work boots?" Most shook their heads. A few said maybe. One young volunteer paused. "There was a guy who helped stack sandbags early Friday. Said almost nothing. Had a bad leg. Do you know where he went? He just vanished." Another woman at the shelter recalled someone matching the description, helping carry a woman from her flooded car. But the woman had passed out, and by the time paramedics arrived, the man was gone. No names, just glimpses, like he was a shadow pulled forward by need, disappearing again before the light could land on him. At home, Ellie drew pictures of him. She didn't know his face, but she drew him anyway. Tall, kind eyes, always beside Sadie. Sometimes he wore a cape. Sometimes he was carrying a flashlight. In one drawing, he had wings. Rachel hung that one on the fridge. Matt shook his head, both amused and unsettled. "She's turning him into a superhero." Rachel traced the scrawl at the bottom. Ellie had written, "For Jay from Sadie. He might be," Rachel said softly, "or he's just someone who saw her and chose not to look away." Matt didn't answer. He just folded the note again and slipped it into the family's folder, the one with birth certificates and old letters, the one they'd carried through the flood. Rachel watched him do it and said nothing. Sometimes, silence is the only way to keep something sacred. Still, the mystery settled in. Jay. One letter, one gesture, one dog saved from certain death. It should have ended there. It almost did. But one morning, weeks later, Rachel stopped at a roadside produce stand. On the way home from work, mud still caked in the tire grooves, the smell of wet wood lingering from the rebuilding. She was buying peaches and didn't notice the man behind her in line until she heard Sadie's name, not spoken, whispered, from behind her. She turned, and her breath caught. He was thinner than she expected, worn, weathered, like a man made of calluses and miles. A canvas jacket clung to his frame, streaked with old stains. His left boot was wrapped with duct tape, and the limp, it was real, heavy, labored. Rachel's fingers tightened around the paper bag of peaches. He had just whispered Sadie's name, but he hadn't looked at her yet. He was talking to someone, the old man who ran the fruit stand. Just a casual exchange. "Dog's name was Sadie?" he asked. The old man nodded toward Rachel. "She's hers, right there." The stranger turned slowly. Their eyes met. For a second, neither moved. Rachel saw it then, a flicker of guilt or recognition, or something quieter than either. He nodded once, brief, almost imperceptible, then looked down. Rachel stepped forward. "It was you." He didn't answer. She tried again. "The note, on our door." Still nothing. But Sadie was in the back seat of Rachel's car, window halfway down. The moment she caught his scent, even from across the gravel lot, she barked, loud, joyful, certain. Then barked again. Then whimpered. Then barked harder. The kind of sound a dog makes when they've just remembered something their body never forgot. The man finally looked at Rachel and said quietly. She didn't stop barking. Rachel felt her throat tighten. She stepped closer. "Why didn't you leave your name?" He shrugged. "Didn't seem important." "I think it is." He turned to go. "Wait," she said. "Please." His footsteps paused. She held out her hand, not in greeting, but in offering. "My daughter drew you, even without knowing you. She said the dog told her what you looked like." That made him smile, just a little. A corner of the mouth, barely there. He turned back and said, "I didn't come here for thanks." "Then why are you here?" "I move around, work where I can, eat what's cheap. Sometimes I stop in towns like this." She studied his eyes. They were pale, like river water, but carried something heavier, the weight of remembering too much and being remembered too little. "What's your name?" He hesitated. Then, James. She exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Rachel, that's my daughter Ellie. And Sadie, obviously. She's strong. She's alive because of you. He shook his head. She's alive because she didn't give up. I just helped her keep going. She reached into her purse and pulled out the folded note. Still smeared, still precious. I saved it. He looked at it for a long moment, then slowly reached out and touched the corner. You wrote this, she said. He didn't deny it. She lowered her voice. You were in that flood, weren't you? Not just this one. Before. His eyes dropped. A shadow moved behind them. I lost someone, he said simply. Rachel waited. My sister, he added after a while. Years ago. Another storm. Another town. I heard her screaming from the attic, but by the time I got through, he stopped, cleared his throat. Doesn't matter. It does, Rachel said. I couldn't save her, but I've pulled out a few others since. Why? He shrugged. Because I knew the sound of someone calling and no one coming. They stood there, surrounded by crates of tomatoes and the low buzz of a nearby power line. The world moved on, but they stood still, held by the gravity of a shared ache. You didn't have to come back, she said softly. I didn't. But you're here. He looked toward the car. Sadie's eyes locked onto his. Her tail wagged slowly, like it wasn't sure if it should. She remembered you. I remembered her too. Rachel reached into her bag and pulled out a drawing Ellie had made, folded into quarters, edges smudged with fingerprints. She handed it to him. He opened it carefully. It was crude, childish, but unmistakably him. Standing in the rain, wrapped in flannel, with Sadie in his arms. At the bottom, Ellie had written, "To the man who found my best friend." His hands trembled. He folded the paper again, slower this time, and placed it in his coat pocket without a word. Come to dinner, Rachel said. Just once, please. He hesitated. Then finally, all right, one meal. And he walked with her to the car, not fast, not with confidence, but with something more honest. Rachel opened the door. Sadie leapt out. She didn't bark this time. She just leaned into him and closed her eyes. He sat at their table like he didn't belong, back straight, shoulders tight, one hand resting flat against his thigh like he was ready to stand and disappear at any moment. Rachel poured iced tea into mismatched glasses and set a plate in front of him. Roast chicken, rice, and sweet corn from a can. Nothing special, but to them, it felt ceremonial. Ellie sat across from him, wide-eyed but quiet. Sadie curled up beneath the table, head resting gently on his boot. You don't have to talk, Rachel said. We're just grateful. James nodded. I don't usually do this. Stay. I figured, Matt said from the kitchen doorway. He hadn't spoken much since James walked through the door. His arms were crossed, expression unreadable. You one of those disaster volunteers? Off the books? James gave a small shrug. Not exactly. I go where I'm needed, not always organized. You live out of your truck? I used to, James said. Now it's more like out of my boots. He glanced down at them, cracked and peeling. The duct tape was coming loose. Rachel broke the silence. We heard stories after the flood. People saw you. No one ever knew your name. James chewed slowly. Then, that's how I like it. But why leave the note? He looked at her, and for a moment, something in his face shifted. Not sadness, but something older. Regret. A wound worn down by time, but never closed. She reminded me of someone, he said. Your sister. He nodded. She was only 12, he added. The flood came fast. They said we shouldn't worry, that it wouldn't reach our street. We believed them. He swallowed hard. She was in the attic. I was at a friend's house across town. I tried to get there, but by the time I did, it was too late. I heard her, screaming. I got the window open. But the water, he stopped. Rachel reached across the table and placed her hand gently over his. He let her. Since then, he continued, quieter now. Whenever I hear someone calling, barking, crying, I don't wait. I just go. They sat in silence. Not awkward, just heavy, sacred. Ellie slid something across the table, another drawing. This one was of Sadie curled in a blanket, a small heart drawn above her. This is how I found her, James said softly, smiling for the first time. She kept barking even when she was stuck. Most dogs panic. She didn't. She never gives up, Ellie said. Neither do you, Rachel added. James didn't reply. He just lowered his eyes to the plate, then to the drawing. He folded it carefully and tucked it into the pocket of his worn jacket beside the first. Matt stepped forward. "Why didn't you tell anyone your name?" "I didn't need to. I wasn't looking for a story." "Most people would have." "I'm not most people." "No," Matt said, his voice softer now. "You're not." After dinner, they sat on the porch. The air smelled of wet wood and cut grass. Somewhere, someone was hammering a new frame into a ruined house. Life was slowly rebuilding, one nail at a time. James sat quietly, sipping tea from a chipped mug with a faded, smiley face. Ellie played in the yard, chasing fireflies. Sadie watched her with alert eyes, tail wagging in slow rhythm. Rachel spoke without turning. "You ever think of staying?" James stared at the horizon. "Sometimes. You'd be welcome here." He looked at her. "Not everyone says that to strangers. You're not a stranger." He smiled, just a flicker. "I should be on the road before sunrise. Will you leave a note this time?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out something, a faded photograph worn at the corners. It showed a young girl, smiling with gap teeth and messy hair, hugging a scruffy dog that looked a lot like Sadie. "My sister," he said. Her name was Lila. Rachel accepted the photo carefully, as if it might crumble from too much weight. "I never got to say goodbye to her properly," James continued, "so I try to say it for other people, quietly." Rachel nodded, understanding more than she could say. When the porch light flickered and Ellie yawned, James stood. Rachel followed him to the gate. "You saved our dog," she said. "But it's more than that." James paused. "She saved you too. You just didn't realize it yet." Then he opened the gate and walked off into the dark. Sadie stood at the threshold, ears perked, watching until he vanished around the corner. He never turned back, but in the morning, when Rachel opened the door, there was something folded beneath the doormat. Another note. "Keep her close. Keep going. Jay." The town rebuilt slowly. Not all at once, not like the news clips showed, with time lapses of houses rising and neighbors hugging. Real rebuilding was messier, quiet, day by day. A porch fixed here, a shop reopened there. Some families never came back. Others returned with less than they'd lost, but more than they realized. For Rachel, the flood had taken furniture, walls, a sense of safety. But it had left something behind too, a direction. She started small, volunteering once a week at the animal shelter. Then, twice. Soon, she was helping coordinate pet reunifications for displaced families, matching dogs with photos, calming scared children, listening to elderly owners talk about pets lost to the storm. Sometimes she cried with them. Sometimes she didn't say anything at all. And when they asked why she did it, she'd just smile and say, "Because someone brought my Sadie back when no one else could." They never pressed further. They didn't need to. Matt rebuilt his business one call at a time. He offered free labor to families who couldn't afford plumbing repairs after the flood, just asked for coffee and a kind word in return. He didn't tell people about James, but when he saw someone limping down the street one afternoon, wearing a different jacket but the same slow gait, he watched him for a long time and then offered him work. The man declined, said he was just passing through. Matt nodded. But the next morning, he left a tool belt and a thermos full of strong black coffee on the bench by the community garden. No note, just the gesture. Ellie, too, carried something different after the storm. She started drawing all the time, not just superheroes or fairy tales, but real people, helpers, bus drivers, janitors, grocery clerks, a firefighter with tears in his eyes, a woman handing out blankets, a man with a duct-taped boot and a flannel shirt. Her teacher once asked who that man was. Ellie replied, "That's Jay. He saved Sadie, and also my mom's heart." The teacher didn't understand, but Rachel did. Once a month, they left something small by the old oak tree near the corner where James had turned out of sight. A bag of dog treats, a can of fruit, a folded note signed with a paw print. They never saw him again. But once, after a hard rain, Rachel found the old flannel shirt, washed, folded, and tucked in a plastic bag at the base of the tree. No words, just one thing written in permanent marker on the inside collar. Still listening. That spring, Sadie grew a little slower. Her hips began to stiffen, her steps more deliberate, but she never let Ellie walk to school alone, not even once. And every time Rachel opened the door, Sadie looked to the left, toward the road James had walked down, as if part of her still waited, Rachel often joined her, not because she expected him, but because some people are worth waiting for, even when they never plan to return. The flood became something they talked about less with fear and more with gratitude, not because it hadn't hurt, it had, but because it had shown them something stronger than destruction. The quiet persistence of people who show up, not for credit, but because someone once didn't. One evening, just before dusk, a man showed up at the shelter where Rachel was cleaning kennels. He was young, jittery, holding a stray pit bull that had wandered into his backyard. "Don't have a leash," he said. "But I didn't want to leave him alone." Rachel smiled. "You did the right thing. I heard you help people reunite pets here." She nodded. He scratched his head. "Why do you do it?" Rachel thought for a long moment, then said, "Because someone once heard a bark and didn't walk away." A few weeks later, Rachel started writing it all down, not as a story, not as a headline, but as a letter. To Jay, it read, "You came into our lives for a moment, but the echo hasn't stopped. We never knew your last name, but we knew your heart, and it changed us. You saved more than a dog. You saved a part of who we were, afraid we'd never get back." She left it at the base of the tree, next to a photo of Sadie sleeping on Ellie's lap. The wind picked up that night. Rain tapped on the roof in soft reminders, and in the morning, the letter was gone. But the flannel remained, tied gently to the fence, fluttering in the breeze like a flag no one could name. Some heroes leave no footprints, just paw prints in the mud. Years passed, floods came and went, though none as cruel as that one. The town rebuilt and then grew. New houses rose on old foundations. The grocery store changed owners twice. The school playground got new swings. And people, as people do, began to forget, but not everyone. Rachel still worked at the shelter, though her hair was streaked with silver now. She moved slower, but her memory was sharp, sharp enough to remember the sound of Sadie's bark, the way it echoed off the water like a prayer, the way it brought someone no one called for, but everyone needed. She kept a small metal box in the back room. Inside it, the original note, dried and pressed flat, Ellie's first drawing, the collar Sadie wore when she returned, and a photo of a man no one ever officially knew, James. Sadie passed quietly one spring morning, curled at the foot of Ellie's bed, her head resting on her old flannel blanket. She was 16. Rachel buried her beneath the oak tree at the corner. No headstone, just a rock painted by Ellie with a single paw print and the words, "She never stopped barking." They held a small memorial, no big speeches, just stories. And in the back, for a moment, Rachel thought she saw someone, tall, limping slightly, wearing a dark coat, watching from across the street. But when she turned, he was gone. Ellie grew up, of course. She became an illustrator, published her first children's book at 24. It was called The Dog Who Waited, about a girl, a flood, and a stranger who leaves a note behind. She never said it was a true story, but in the acknowledgments, there were 3 lines. For my mom, who taught me what strength sounds like in silence. For Sadie, who never gave up. And for Jay, wherever you are, I still remember. Rachel received a letter not long after the book release. No return address, no postmark, just her name written in uneven letters on the envelope. Inside, a scrap of lined paper, folded twice. On it, only one sentence. "You gave her the life I couldn't give my sister. Thank you." And beneath it, something else. A pressed dogwood flower taped to the bottom corner. Rachel traced the edges with her fingers, sat at the table for a long time before finally lighting a candle and placing the letter beside Sadie's collar. Then she whispered aloud, as if someone might be listening. Still listening. Some say heroes wear capes, that they fly in, dramatic and loud, when the world is crumbling. But that's not what happened here. No applause, no spotlight, just a soaked note. A dog who wouldn't stop barking, and a man who knew that sometimes the smallest rescues echo the loudest, because the best stories aren't the ones shouted, they're the ones remembered, passed down, quietly, gratefully, one saved life at a time.
Love this story? Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. Don't forget to check out the video currently on your screen. You won't want to miss it. See you in the next one.